May 2000. Deep inside the CERN Research Center in Geneva, Switzerland, two physicists face an unexpected press crisis. They aren't accused of fraud or failure. They're being asked whether CERN, home of the Large Hadron Collider, is secretly building a weapon to destroy the Vatican. The question isn't metaphorical. It's based on a novel, a fiction book, but the public doesn't care. Neither do the journalists. Because the book, Angels and Demons, by Dan Brown claims that a secret society has stolen antimatter from CERN and planted it under St. Peter's Basilica to annihilate the Holy See. The idea spreads fast. Too fast. Forums light up. TV shows call it plausible. People ask if antimatter can be used as a bomb, if the Illuminati are real, if the Pope is safe. The boundary between fantasy and fact blurs. Science becomes suspect, and the Vatican, again, becomes a battlefield. Angels and Demons was fiction, but the panic it triggered was not, because Dan Brown didn't just write a story. He injected a heresy into the bloodstream of modern myth, and the body reacted. Angels and Demons was published in 2000, written by American author Dan Brown. On the surface, it's a thriller. A race-against-time adventure filled with symbology, murders, and ancient secrets. But beneath that, it's something else, a manifesto of distrust. The plot is simple in shape, but vast in implication. A physicist is murdered at CERN. A canister of antimatter is stolen. The Illuminati, a legendary secret society supposedly erased by the Catholic Church, claims responsibility. The antimatter is hidden somewhere in Vatican City, and the countdown begins. The protagonist, Robert Langdon, is a Harvard symbologist who follows clues hidden in Bernini sculptures, church architecture, and ancient manuscripts. His guide? A CERN scientist and daughter of the murdered physicist. The goal? Stop the Illuminati before the Vatican is vaporized. Dan Brown's style is cinematic. Chapters end in cliffhangers. Descriptions are visual, almost storyboard. But what makes the book dangerous, at least in the eyes of critics, is how it blends fact and fiction with surgical precision. CERN is real. Antimatter is real. The Vatican archives exist. The Illuminati have a documented mythos. Brown doesn't invent these things. He reorders them, recontextualizes them, and pushes them just far enough to be thrilling, but close enough to feel true. The result? A fiction that functions like a virus. It spreads, attaches to real institutions, and infects public perception. Suddenly, scientists must defend themselves against sci-fi accusations. Priests are asked about antimatter. Conspiracists feel vindicated. Angels and Demons isn't just a book that entertains. It's a book that reprograms. It changes how readers see power, science, and faith, and convinces them that nothing is ever quite what it seems. The most dangerous idea in Angels and Demons is that the Catholic Church isn't just wrong, it's hiding something. That beneath centuries of liturgy and art lies a campaign of violence, censorship, and power grabs. And worse, that it's losing. That science, once silenced by the Church, is back for revenge. In Brown's version of history, the Illuminati weren't just philosophers. They were scientists, martyrs of logic, killed or exiled by the Church for believing in reason. Their secret revenge? To infiltrate the Vatican, stage a false conclave, and detonate a stolen vial of antimatter under St. Peter's. The symbols Brown uses aren't random. The path of illumination, the ambigrams, the locations of the murders, all are embedded in real churches, real sculptures, real architecture. Bernini becomes a conspirator. Galileo, a victim. The Vatican, a labyrinth of lies. And the crimes are theatrical. Cardinals are murdered by methods symbolic of the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. Their deaths aren't just executions. They're sermons. Messages carved into flesh. And the killer, of course, believes he's delivering justice. Brown doesn't stop at fiction. He inserts real conflicts into the narrative: the ban on stem cell research, the censorship of Galileo, the Vatican's historical alliances and betrayals. Readers come away not with questions, but with conclusions. And that's the trap. Angels and Demons isn't an attack on faith. It's a seduction. It gives readers the thrill of rebellion, the pleasure of secret knowledge, the fantasy of being smarter than priests. It doesn't burn the church. It outshines it. When Angels and Demons was published, it didn't cause outrage. Not at first. It just sold. Quietly. Consistently. Readers passed it along like contraband. But after the success of the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown's earlier book was pulled back into the spotlight. And this time, it detonated. Suddenly, Brown's blend of religion, murder, and science became a formula for panic. The Catholic Church issued official denouncements. Vatican spokespersons called the book offensive, historically misleading, and dangerous to young readers. But the most bizarre backlash came from the scientific world. Journalists flooded CERN with questions. Could antimatter really be weaponized? Was the technology real? Did the church ever silence physicists? Public interest spiked so dramatically that CERN had to issue FAQs to debunk the fiction. Meanwhile, conspiracy forums lit up. The Illuminati trended. Readers who never studied physics were now arguing online about quantum vacuum states and magnetic confinement systems. The film adaptation in 2009 only added gasoline to the fire. Directed by Ron Howard, starring Tom Hanks and filmed in Rome, with Vatican locations reconstructed in secret due to lack of permission, it reached millions. The Vatican refused to cooperate. Churches banned filming. Cardinals criticized the plot publicly. But the more the church protested, the more audiences watched. In trying to suppress the fiction, they amplified it. What Brown had created was more than a novel. It was a narrative ecosystem, part fiction, part tourism, part theological provocation. He turned religious paranoia into marketable suspense. And once released, the stories stopped being his. Angels and Demons is not a conspiracy theory, but it functions like one. It rewards the reader for doubting institutions, mistrusting history, and believing that the real truth is always hidden just behind the curtain, if you're clever enough to decode the symbols. That's what makes it addictive. Not the plot, the posture. Brown doesn't just tell his story, he flatters the reader, makes them feel chosen. Like they've been invited into a secret conversation between reason and religion, logic and mystery, the sacred and the scandalous. And we love that. As a culture, we've become fluent in suspicion. We crave forbidden knowledge. We share videos that claim to expose, explain, decode, reveal. Not because we want facts, but because we want to feel like insiders. Angels and Demons gives us that. But there's a darker truth beneath that thrill. That maybe we don't trust institutions anymore because they failed us, or because it's easier to believe in Illuminati than in complexity. Because a villain in a robe is more satisfying than a system in crisis. Brown doesn't force that idea. He slips it in, gently, through details that feel researched, names that sound plausible, science that's half true, theology that's half wrong. And suddenly, fiction becomes architecture. You don't read Angels and Demons, you move through it. That's why it worked. That's why it sold. That's why it scared bishops and physicists alike. Not because it lied, but because it blurred the line so well that we started wishing it were true. So yes, CERN had to issue statements. Scientists had to explain that antimatter wasn't a bomb, and priests had to remind people that Bernini wasn't a conspirator. But none of that mattered. Because once a myth is elegant enough, truth becomes optional. Angels and Demons wasn't a warning. It was a mirror. And the reflection still stares back at us. If that unsettled you, good. We don't come here for comfort. We come here to remember that books still burn, but now they burn minds. If this disturbed you, share it. And if you want more books that blurred fiction and sacrilege until someone got hurt, watch our deep dive into the Satanic Verses, the novel that triggered a global manhunt and turned one author into a target for decades.